Women have been conditioned to not say no in the presence of pain because we all had to get pap smears where pieces of hard, cold metal or plastic was shoved inside of us and our cervix scraped. And many of us may have started our cycles before the age of 12. This is one of the reasons the medical institution is experiencing karma now. We didn't have a right to say no. It was something that was not only recommended, but it was told to our caregivers that it was necessary. The irony of this form of hidden ritualistic abuse is the fact that there are foods and hormones that were given to us that actually cause us to have puberty and cycles earlier than we would naturally have, which means our minds weren't developed strong enough to be able to handle what was going to happen to us when we received the pap smear. MK Ultra is a form of mind control. Participants are programmed to have certain beliefs. They're programmed to deny the pain that they are experiencing until they finally have different personalities and sub-personalities that are created as a result of the trauma. Many of us who may have grew up in church did not have a right to say no to the men who wanted to lay hands on us. And if we did say no, we were considered to be out of order, sinful, demonic, even possessed. As I have entered into perimenopause, I ask myself, how did the women before me deal with this? Because no one never talked about it. No one ever acted like they were going through anything. I don't recall the men in their lives treating them differently as if they were going through anything. So in our relationships, we have also been programmed to deny ourselves the right to say no to pain and to feel that our body is nothing more than a sacrificial offering to whatever the intentions are of the man in our lives. The inability to say no, the permission to have boundaries being denied of us generation after generation now has equal to the rates of autoimmune disease and complex PTSD, Cassandra syndrome, and many other issues that developed as a result of this. Our physical bodies are literally shutting down and turning against us because it can't identify the enemy, because the enemy has been placed into me, inside of us. The demonization of goddesses which act as archetypes for women, such as Lilith, who had her own truth, her own mind, her own preference as to how she wanted to have sex, and she was not allowed to do that. And whenever she spoke her truth, whenever she did what was right for her, it led to her being completely disowned and kicked out of the Garden of Eden, which taught us a subconscious lesson that to be a woman is to be nice, to acquiesce, to do as you're told, and only as you're told. The purpose of this is not to discount that men have went through things, but to highlight the fact that women, as little girls, was going through things that men can't even wrap their minds around. The fact of the matter is that most monotheistic religion have many different laws, rules, even righteous regulations in place that are nothing less than horrific as to what is permissible to be done to a woman who steps out of line. Despite all of the technological advancements that we are recommended to get mammograms every year that are very painful, where our breasts are crushed and smashed in between two very hard plates to take pictures as we stand in very difficult and painful positions. Once again, we have not been given the right to say no, because saying no could possibly mean that you would die from a disease that is usually caused by repressed emotions, trauma, pain, and not to leave out the fact that there are things that is in our food that leads to these different forms of cancers as well. This is the cost of being a woman that many men are completely unaware of, or if they know, there may be a lack of ability to care because they haven't walked in our shoes. I refuse to believe that we now have a quantum computer called Willow that is capable of calculating things that would take eons, but we haven't found a way to test for these things within the body of women on this planet. These subtle but deeply painful truths are something that I came into and I have been sharing for over a decade now. This is the reason that you may not see me on your FYP. This is the reason that you may not ever see anything that I post, because I have been 100% accurate in everything that I have shared. At this point, it is no denying the suffering, the abuse, the negligence, and the ritualistic abuse that has been hidden behind the medical facilities can be ignored. It's obvious. As we enter into perimenopause and menopause, as our estrogen drops, there are so many things that are horrific that we have to go through that happens to our mind and our body. But for some reason, this isn't a conversation. This is rarely taken into account. It's as if women are expected to show up in relationships as their 20-year-old self, even though they're 50. And this is another major point of trauma. Any man who is participating in these traumatic experiences for women will feel the weight of that, because the Great Mother has returned, bringing forth wisdom, the wisdom of the divine feminine. It is so important right now for anyone listening to me. If there is a woman in your life that you love, consider the fact that maybe she is carrying an invisible burden, and maybe she has went through some things that she can't really put words to, and she deserves love. She deserves support. And I know that there are things that happen to men as well. They intentionally socially engineered us so that men would not know how to support us as we go through some of the most difficult things that a woman could ever go through. One of the main reasons black men are paid very well for disrespecting women in music and videos is due to the agenda to keep us divided, to keep us in our egoic, wounded self, fighting each other to be right. This is a mental, spiritual virus that is deep within the subconscious, unconscious psyche. Remember, we only have access to 5% of our brains, which means that most of the access to our brain has been hidden behind a veil. But why is it hidden behind a veil? And how do we get access to that? A woman can only show up as a reflection of the emotional tone that a man in her life sets consistently. To expect a woman to do anything other than that with what I have mentioned here, which is only a tip of the iceberg, is unfair, and it is time for these expectations to be dropped and released. Stay tuned. I will continue to teach and speak these truths. And if you would like to dive deeper into my metaphysical lectures that were all shadow banned and removed, you can access those on my Patreon on all tiers.